Now Brandon looking to throw. He will throw. High arcing pass, and what a grab brought in by Hudson Cooper. Spins away, sprint.
This is Faizon Brandon. Coming out in the class of 2026, this kid is not only a 5-star recruit, but he is also the #1 quarterback and overall player in the entire nation. And although he's mostly known for being a pocket passer, he definitely got some wheels on him too. A lot of people seem to think that he plays a lot like former Tennessee quarterback Nico Iamaleava. But Faizon has all the tools to be just as good, if not even better, at the next level. So today I am putting Faizon Brandon into college football 26. Let's see how his career turns out after he finishes up his last year of high school as we follow him on his road to glory. Now going into his senior season of high school football, Faizon has made it very clear that he wants to go somewhere that will develop him over time. And that's why some of the top schools on his recruiting board is Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia. But now that Faizon is heading into his final few games of his high school career, he knows he got to come out here and really put in that work to earn that scholarship. So that's why on this play he sees a receiver running out, and he decides to hit the defense with a little making a great play that gets his team in the end zone for a touchdown. He had the whole crowd hyped up until the opposing team would eventually come back and take the lead. So he knows with less than 2 minutes left, he got to really lock in order to get the job done. And that all starts here with an incredible throw on the run that gets him inside the red zone. And y'all see that? See, he already dancing because he knows what's about to happen. Because it would literally only be one play later where he would drop back and find a man open at the front of the end zone for a touchdown, putting up some points that allows his team to take the lead in the final moments of the game and eventually come away with the victory. And now all of a sudden Faizon is getting a bunch of offers. But there was still one team that he really wanted to hear from, and eventually he would. As the Tennessee head coach would hit him up and tell him that there's going to be some scouts at his next game. And honestly, man, that's all Faizon Brandon needed to hear. And it turns out, man, that he was so locked in, they didn't even let him walk out the tunnel. They just teleported him right to the field. And in the game that was tied at 17 later on in the third quarter, Faizon Brandon was showing that he had some pretty good running ability too. I mean, look at him, he out there moving. He's seen this one dude coming towards him, he hit him with that, hey. Okay, Faizon, see, he really liked that. By the end of this game, Grimsley High School would have the lead late in the fourth quarter. And Faizon Brandon was looking to put this one away as he scrambled out to the left side and dove across the goal line for a score, putting the Whirlies up by 2 possessions in the final moments of this game and securing another victory for his team. Now at this point, Faizon was getting a ton of new I think I spelled his name wrong. You stupid. But Faizon was out here getting a ton of offers, and he was still the #1 player in the country. And I don't think that would change much going into his next game as he was out there making a crazy throw off his back foot that was eventually caught by a receiver downfield. His team was in a real close game by the end of the fourth quarter, but once again Faizon was out here utilizing his legs to make a huge play towards the end zone, coming up with a TD that gave his team the lead with less than 1:30 on the clock, and allowing the Whirlies to finish off another game with a win. Now with Faizon Brandon having gotten offers from pretty much every school that he wanted to go to, he decided to take a look at his recruiting board before eventually verbally committing to Tennessee. His decision wasn't completely final yet, but he was feeling good about it going into his final game of his high school career. Where once again in the final moments of the game when his team needed it most, it was Faizon Brandon out there saying hey, and getting his team across the goal line for a score, allowing his team the chance to take the lead with less than 30 seconds left. And just like that, man, Faizon Brandon had officially established himself as the #1 player in all of the nation. But now that his senior season is officially over, eventually National Signing Day would come around, and he was ready to make his final decision on his future when it came to picking his college. So when it came to his top 3 schools, they would end up being Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee. And when it came to his college decision, he decided that he was going to go to Alabama. Nah, he's not going to Alabama. They already got Keelan Russell. He actually decided that he was going to head to Athens and join the Georgia Nah, you're not playing for no Georgia Bulldogs. Get him out of here. When it came to Faizon Brandon's college decision, he decided to sign with the Tennessee Volunteers. Now, the moment that Faizon Brandon stepped on campus, they were already wanting to offer him the job as the backup quarterback. He was just going to have to come out here and practice and prove that he deserved it. And I'm not going to lie, bro, he was doing a little bit more than that, man. I mean, he was out there showing off his mobility and proved that he could make some nice throws out of the pocket while he was under pressure. So eventually, Faizon was named the backup quarterback by the end of the spring practices. But by the time school came around, he was also doing pretty good in the classroom. This kid was a scholar. It was safe to say that the coaches were definitely happy with him going into the first game of the season, where Tennessee would be at home facing off against FCS Southwest. Now, since Faizon wasn't the starter, man, he obviously felt like he wasn't going to get any playing time in this game. But everything seemed to change after Tennessee was beating the brakes off of their opponent. And by the time the fourth quarter came around, Faizon Brandon would officially make his college football debut. Somehow Tennessee's opponent had them backed up on their own 2-yard line with a good chance that they could get a safety. But one handoff to the running back here who took it around the edge and came up with a big play downfield allows them some room to breathe. That actually made the coaches comfortable enough to run a pass play up 31 points in the fourth quarter. And on this play, all Faizon had to do was just drop back and say, "Yeow," before it ended up in the hands of the receiver who took it around the edge and he was gone. This man outran the entire defense and took it to the end zone for the first touchdown of Faizon Brandon's college career. On his very first pass play too. Man, this score had the whole stadium rocking. Not just because their freshman quarterback came up with his first score of his career, but also because Tennessee got their first win of the season, as Tennessee would go on to destroy their opponent 45-0. And honestly, Faizon was wondering why his teammates were so hyped for him after the game, but it would turn out that the coaches actually wanted him to become the starter. The kid had literally only thrown one pass in his career so far, and the coaches had already seen enough. So y'all can understand that they felt like Faizon was about to be the future, and pretty much everything he did in practice the following week just solidified their beliefs, as Faizon Brandon, the true freshman, was now the starting quarterback for Tennessee. And at this point, man, Faizon realized that he had to be completely locked in and just get as great as he can as soon as possible. Cause soon, he was going to be heading into his first game of his college football career as a starter. And this time, it would be another home game on a bright and sunny day. Faizon knew that as soon as he ran out this tunnel, his legacy was about to begin. But he was more than ready to officially get into his first game as a starter against the Indiana Hoosiers. Now to start this game, the coaches wanted to get the running backs going, but they only picked up 5 yards in 2 plays. So they came to a third down where Faizon would find a man on the slant route for a big first down. And soon it seemed like these boys were moving. Faizon would keep hitting the number 1 receiver on a slant route as he was consistently getting open. And it did not stop as they got inside the red zone, as another pass to Chris Brazzell II gets Tennessee in the end zone for their first touchdown of the game, putting up some points that seems to give the Volunteers a lot of momentum going forward, as they would eventually get the ball back still up by 7. And this time the starting running back was looking to redeem himself as he came up with a big play on the outside. Hey, damn, y'all see that he broke that man's ankle. Faizon ended up giving him another handoff to finish off this drive, getting across the goal line to put Tennessee up by 14 here late in the first quarter. Now, one thing in this game that was surprising even the Tennessee fans was Brandon's ability to extend plays and come up with some nice plays downfield, man. Y'all see that right there? Look at that. He's making a play that puts him over 100 yards for the first time in his career, and I don't think he's anywhere near done yet, because he also had a great ability to stand in the pocket and take a hit while delivering a dime underneath, allowing his receivers to make a play that got them down towards goal-to-goal territory. Now, unfortunately, not every drive could end great, as he and his receiver were not on the same page, but he did give his team a chance to take a 3-possession lead as they were heading into halftime. Well, that was at least before Indiana kicked the field goal to make it 2 possessions at the start of the fourth quarter, bringing us to a 2nd down and 10 where Faizon was ready to make another big play. He dropped back to pass and ended up getting smacked before hitting a receiver in stride downfield, allowing him to cross over the goal line for Faizon's 2nd touchdown of the day. And with a score that puts his team up by 3 possessions here in the fourth, Faizon Brandon had done enough to put this game away, closing this one out 27-17 in a game where Faizon threw for 300 yards off of 88% completion percentage. Man, this dude a dog. Faizon had played so well during his first game as a starter that the coaches knew right then and there that there was going to be no turning back. Tennessee officially had their quarterback of the future, and the coaches were trusting him more and more every day, but he would continue to build upon that trust by working hard on the practice field. Faizon wanted to become the best player that he could possibly be, and he wouldn't stop working until he got there. And that's probably why the coaches were so happy to have him on the team. But in the back of their minds, I bet they still wish they had Nico Iamaleava, who at this point in the season was the leader in the race to win the Heisman Trophy. And although there were probably many Tennessee faithful who still wished that he was a Volunteer, this team was now Faizon Brandon's. But he was going to have to come up with some big games in order to keep them as his team, especially as he was now heading on the road to face off against his first SEC opponent, as Tennessee gets an opportunity to face off against the Auburn Tigers. Now, early on in this game, Faizon realized that he was not going to have a ton of time to throw, so he made it a point to try and find his receivers open underneath, allowing them to come up with plays that can move the sticks. On his opening drive, he noticed that Auburn was sending the blitz to try to mess him up, but it wasn't really working as the receivers were ready for some short passes, and eventually Tennessee would actually hit them with a play action that just barely allowed Faizon the time to hit a receiver right over the middle, bringing the team down to the goal line where a handoff to the running back gets him around the edge and in the end zone for a touchdown, putting up the first points in this game at the start of the second quarter and giving them a lead that they would maintain all throughout. Because even on later drives where Tennessee would actually get stopped on 3rd down, they were still able to get the ball back up 7-3, and Faizon was doing a great job hitting people over the middle to get the team back into field goal range, allowing them to come up with 3 points before halftime and eventually get the ball back up a touchdown before Auburn would send a 6-man blitz. Faizon Brandon had seen it coming though, and he had a ton of room down the sideline. He even tried to hit a dude with a hey, but they said hi right back. They got to a 3rd down and 3 where unfortunately receiver dropped the pass in the end zone, and that would actually end up a very meaningful play as Auburn would eventually tie this game up at 13. So now with less than 1 minute left on the clock, Faizon Brandon knew he had to go out there and make a play. And on the 2nd down and 4, he decided to extend the play by rolling out right and eventually found a man downfield, hitting a receiver who got the team right back into field goal range, eventually bringing him to a 3rd down with less than 30 seconds left. And once again, Faizon was out there using his legs to not only pick up a 1st down, but slide and keep the clock moving, putting his team in perfect position to put this game away, as Tennessee goes on to close this game out 16-13. And it turned out to be another good game from Faizon Brandon, who although didn't throw a lot of touchdowns, he did throw for over 200 yards and had no turnovers in the game where every score mattered. And the good thing is that he was only just getting better as he was improving pretty much every single week. He was always working hard to become one of the best quarterbacks in the nation. He wanted his name up there with guys like Nico and Arch Manning and DJ Lagway. Wait, he threw for 8 touchdowns? Oh nah, see I didn't know he went to Texas. Hey, but you know what, it's all good though, because Faizon Brandon believed that his team would continue to win throughout the season. He was just going to have to keep playing well, especially in his next game on the road against Miami of Ohio. Now on this opening drive, Faizon was just dinking and dunking downfield before they would eventually get down to the goal line, coming to a 1st down and 10 where he would find another man underneath who put on a crazy move on a linebacker. It got the team across the goal line for a touchdown. The big play that seemed to give Tennessee a ton of momentum going forward, although Miami of Ohio would tie this game up at 7. And all of a sudden that momentum looked like it was about to flip as Faizon Brandon threw his first pick of his college football career. And it was definitely a bad one that gave Miami an opportunity to potentially take the lead. Luckily though, they could not capitalize and actually gave Tennessee the ball back with great field position. And Faizon made sure to take advantage by scrambling out of the pocket and picking up a big 1st down that gets him in field goal range before half. But after halftime, things were still not looking too great as not only was Faizon cold, but they got to a 3rd down and 11. And on a play where Faizon was actually getting run down, he decided to throw up a prayer that was somehow caught. The receiver makes a big play that not only keeps the drive alive, but seemingly set the tone for the team going forward as Faizon, even under pressure, continued to make big throws over the middle, ultimately bringing Tennessee right back down towards the goal line where he scrambled out right and was coming up with an easy rushing touchdown, one of the first ones of his college football career. And at this point it looks like the floodgates were about to open, because Miami gave the ball right back to Tennessee once again with great field position. And once again Faizon Brandon was taking advantage by throwing a dime towards the end zone, coming up with a big score that puts Tennessee up by 3 possessions in this game. But in a performance where Miami's offense just continued to turn the ball over in their own territory, this just allowed Faizon Brandon another opportunity to go out there and say, hey, and pick up another rushing touchdown on the day. And at this point, Tennessee was absolutely dominating. And unfortunately for Miami, it did not stop there as they would once again give the ball away with great field position. And on 2nd down, all it took was a pass out to the running back who stretched his arm over the goal line for another touchdown, not only putting the team up by 30 points with the time winding down, but doing enough to put this game away, as Tennessee goes on to obliterate Miami of Ohio 38-7. And although Faizon Brandon did throw an interception, this turned out to be his best game of his college career so far, going for 268 yards passing and 5 touchdowns. A huge game that obviously had Tennessee's coach extremely happy, but also seemed to put Tennessee on a roll going forward throughout their season. Because in the next game at home against Oregon State, Faizon Brandon and the rest of this offense was absolutely dominating. They had no problem getting down to the goal line on multiple possessions as they came up with multiple touchdowns in the first half, putting them up 14-0 before it would eventually become 14-7. But again, down at the goal line, all it took was a pass to the running back who would eventually make this 21-7. And at this point, the team was just asserting their dominance at home, because after they would eventually get right back down to the goal line in the 4th quarter, another handoff to the running back that took it upfield and across the goal line would put them up by 21 points in this game, doing enough to officially give them another win on the season. And at this point, with Tennessee's freshman quarterback playing absolutely lights out so far, it was no surprise that everybody in the entire stadium, including his teammates, absolutely loved him. Because even when he was off the field, this kid was just completely unselfish, as he gave his coaches a ton of credit for the success that they've had so far this season. And on top of that, he was actually earning his first NIL deal with Sonny Sombrero. And it's crazy because that's actually one of his favorite foods. But as the season was progressing, Tennessee would start playing in some much tougher games, especially including the next one that they would be playing back at home, facing off against another SEC opponent, South Carolina. Now, it did not take long into this one for Faizon to realize just how difficult this game would be. On his opening drive, the offense was put well behind the sticks, basically derailing their possession and eventually having to go 3 and out. But as this game went on, he was really starting to get used to this pressure, and he realized that he was going to have to use his legs quite a bit if he wanted to move the chains for his team. Eventually, they would get to the red zone and ran an RPO that would spring the tight end wide open. And after Faizon hit him out in the flat, he had a ton of room ahead of him to just glide towards the end zone for a touchdown, helping Tennessee take a 7-3 lead at the start of the second quarter. And now the Volunteers had some momentum on their side. Because although there were still a ton of plays where Faizon Brandon was running for his life, trying to find a way to escape this pass rush and pick up a few yards just to eventually get sacked, it didn't matter when South Carolina's offense was playing horrible and even turned the ball over in their own territory, allowing Faizon Brandon an opportunity to redeem himself by slicing up this defense and coming up with another touchdown here in the second quarter, giving Tennessee a 2-possession lead that they would actually maintain into the second half. And I'm not gonna lie, man, Faizon Brandon began to step it up a bit by not only using his leg to pick up some yards, but extend the play before finding a man downfield. He made a ton of great throws at the opening drive of the third quarter that allowed his team to get in the red zone, and one more here on first down that ultimately got his team across the goal line for a touchdown. This kid was having an incredible game with 3 touchdowns already against one of the best defenses in the SEC. But he was not the only one who began to play really well in the second half, as South Carolina would find a way to come back, bringing this to a 19-21 ball game, and they actually had a chance to take the lead here on this drive, but eventually got stopped. Soon after, though, Tennessee would find themselves right back down towards the goal line, where a read option that Faizon kept for a touchdown would not only put them back up by 2 possessions with less than 2 minutes left in this game, but would also allow them to stay undefeated on the season, as Tennessee comes away with a 28-19 victory against another SEC opponent, led by their true freshman quarterback who had 4 touchdowns on the day on 78% completion percentage. Oh yeah, he definitely different, and that's why they started letting him orchestrate the band. But even after a great win, and despite the fact that he'd been playing well all season, Faizon Brandon was nowhere to be seen in this Heisman race. And a lot of Tennessee fans were happy to see that Nico Iamaleava was no longer winning it as well, as DJ Lagway was now officially the frontrunner. But all this really did was just motivate Faizon to keep getting better every single week. And considering the fact that out of every quarterback who had thrown for over 1,000 yards so far, Faizon was actually sitting 5th in completion percentage, he had something to be proud of and potentially even build upon going forward throughout the season. But the entire state of Tennessee would definitely need him to keep evolving as a player, especially as they were about to head into a very tough stretch of games against a bunch of SEC opponents, including their next one at home in the rain against 13th ranked and undefeated Ole Miss. Now in this one, Tennessee was getting off to an incredible start. Faizon saw the blitz coming out the snap and instantly hit his tight end over the middle, allowing him time to make a move on a defender before getting his team all the way down to the goal line. And a couple plays later, a little touch pass to the receiver got them across for a score, putting them up by 7 before eventually Ole Miss would tie this game back up. And then the momentum seemed to swing a little bit as Faizon Brandon rolled out and threw another interception on his season. Now luckily Ole Miss wasn't able to capitalize too much off it, as they only got 3 points. And on the next possession, they would actually get a little bit of help as 2 defenders run into each other and allow Chris Brazzell to be wide open, escaping past the final defender as he breaks free for a 90-yard touchdown. A big score that not only gives Tennessee the lead in the second quarter, but also sets the tone for them going forward. Because in this one, Chris Brazzell feels like he has a mismatch on the outside, so Faizon decides to throw it up to him. And even though there was pretty good coverage played on him, it turns out that Chris Brazzell is a demon. Man, this play was so crazy that Faizon had to make sure that he wasn't playing against the Pop Warner team or something. But it would not take long for him to realize that he was definitely playing against the right team, because Ole Miss was out there just chasing him around the field, and eventually he had to throw it away and settle for 3 before halftime. Now by the end of the third quarter, even with Ole Miss destroying the Tennessee line, Faizon was able to find his weapons open underneath and allow them to make plays to get the team back in scoring range, ultimately leading them to a 3rd and 10 at the start of the fourth quarter, where Faizon Brandon delivers a strike over the middle to a receiver who is able to turn it upfield for a score, putting Tennessee up by now 2 possessions in this game, which was a lead that they would maintain all the way till the end of the fourth, where now with around 2 minutes left, all they really needed was a couple more first downs to put this game away. But on this play, Faizon finds enough space to actually get the team inside goal-to-go territory, bringing us to another 3rd down where once again Faizon scrambled out of the pocket, this time up the middle for a touchdown, putting his team up by 3 possessions in the final moments of this game, but doing enough to give Ole Miss their first loss of the season and keep their undefeated streak alive, as Tennessee closes this one out 34-24. And this was definitely a tough game for Faizon Brandon, but he still did pretty well by putting up some points on the board. Regardless, he still felt pretty good about how he played, considering that his team was now 7-0 and the 7th-ranked team in the country. But he knows that Tennessee is now going on the road heading into some of the toughest parts of their schedule. He had no choice but to play better if he wanted to keep their streak alive, and he'd have to find a way to come up with some big plays as Tennessee was about to face off against Missouri. Now, one element to his game that Faizon added was pump faking defenders out before saying "meow" and allowing his receivers to pick up first down. Another thing was running way more play actions as he was getting blitzed a lot. And on this play it definitely seemed to work as he had the entire right side of the field wide open as he crossed over the goal line for a touchdown. A big score that gave his team the lead early on, and they definitely did not let up. One thing for sure though was that neither was that Missouri blitz. But although they were coming after Faizon pretty often, they still found a way to counter, calling screen passes that allowed the running back to get open and get downfield for a touchdown, eventually coming up with another score that had Faizon Brandon absolutely hyped. And as this game continued into the second half, this Tennessee offense just continued to open up the floodgates, pouring on more points as they were now taking a commanding 4-possession lead. But if that wasn't good enough, another touch by Ahmad Hardy, who took his handoff up the middle and got across the goal line for another score, would effectively do enough to put an end to this game, as Tennessee would go on to beat the cat piss out of the Tigers 35-10, just absolutely demolishing them in a game where Faizon went for another 3 touchdowns. And it's crazy to think that even with all the success that he's been having all season, Faizon Brandon was still out there putting extra work in at practice, doing absolutely everything he could to become the best player that he could possibly be. And it seems like more and more companies began to notice that he had the potential to be a superstar player in college football. One thing for sure though is that this Tennessee team had continued to grow stronger throughout the weeks. And it seems like when they were playing a team that was not on their level, they had no problem taking care of business, and they hoped that wouldn't change in their next game against Texas A&M. Now early on in this one, Tennessee did a great job utilizing play action to free up their weapons downfield. And Faizon was doing an even better job finding players underneath, like his tight end who turned it upfield for a score, taking the early 7-0 lead over Texas A&M, but this was really only just the beginning. Because one of the things that Faizon was able to develop over time was his ability to read the defense and find his guy in wide open zones, eventually leading his team down to the goal line where he took a read option up the middle for another score on the day, putting his team up by multiple possessions and seemingly giving them a ton of control in this game, as they would eventually get right back down to the same position with less than 10 seconds left in the half, and Faizon Brandon was still delivering underneath, this time to his running back for another touchdown. Tennessee damn near had this game on lock already. But just in case anybody in the crowd felt like there was room for a comeback, one pass to the tight end who leaked out and got upfield for another score would not only do enough to give Tennessee an insurmountable lead, but would also officially push Tennessee to 9-0 on this season, as once again the Volunteers were just dominating another opponent. Another game mostly led by their quarterback who threw for over 350 yards and 4 touchdowns. Faizon Brandon was making his case as the best freshman quarterback in the nation. And at this point, the coaches were just about as happy as they can be because Tennessee was now a top 5 team in the nation. And they would have a pretty big opportunity coming up that would give them a chance to push their rankings even higher, as Tennessee would find themselves back at home for their next game, facing off against another top-tier SEC team, the 11th ranked LSU Tigers. Now on their opening possession, LSU was sending a 5-man rush almost every time, so Faizon made sure to throw short routes that would allow them the chance to get downfield. Ultimately though, they would get to a 3rd and goal where he barely had enough time to get this pass off, and it ended up incomplete. The good news though is that not only was Tennessee taking the 3-point lead, but LSU gave them the ball right back. But the bad news is that Faizon Brandon threw another pick, certainly taking points off the board that would have gave them a 2-possession lead. But good news again, the LSU offense was ass and immediately gave the ball right back. Once again, a great field position that Faizon Brandon took advantage of by taking this read option to the end zone for a touchdown, putting up a score that now gave Tennessee the 2-possession lead, and you can just see it in the swing of his arms, man. Faizon was definitely hyped. Eventually though, this one would end up tied at a 10-10 ball game. But Faizon Brandon didn't seem to be under any pressure physically or mentally, as he just stayed calm in the pocket and continued to deliver strikes over the middle. And I don't know why the camera continues to follow the ball and not Faizon, but that's not even the point, because eventually Faizon would lead them inside the red zone. And on a play that they've utilized all season, it once again seemed to work, as the tight end got open and got a block downfield that allowed him to get in the end zone for a touchdown, putting up some points that gave Tennessee the lead here late in the 4th quarter. And after LSU's offense continued to stall out, Tennessee was on their way to another win, closing this one out against one of the top teams in the nation 17-10. And once again, although Faizon threw an interception, he made up for it by playing well throughout the rest of the game. This kid was definitely special. And even though he wasn't having nearly as good of a season as their former quarterback Nico Iamaleava, he was not really their main focus right now, as it turns out that the leading Heisman candidate DJ Lagway was somebody that Tennessee was going to be visiting here real soon, as now the Volunteers were heading into easily their toughest game of the season. A big-time matchup between not only 2 of the toughest teams in the entire SEC, but also against the current Heisman favorite, as Tennessee was now on the road set to face off against DJ Lagway and the Texas Longhorns. Now, even though they were on the road playing in the top 3 toughest environment in the entire nation, that didn't really seem to bother Faizon Brandon, This is a kid who played in and won multiple state championships, so there's no amount of loud that would stop him from delivering dimes like this one. A nice pass that allowed his receiver to turn upfield and get across the goal line for the early touchdown, putting points up on their opening drive, and by the end of the first quarter, it actually seems like DJ Lagway was struggling. Soon though, Tennessee would actually start seeing similar struggles as they were getting stopped on multiple third downs. Even then, Texas wasn't really able to capitalize much as they only had 3 points by the third quarter. And at that point, Tennessee was actually driving back downfield to potentially extend their lead to 2 possessions. They got to a second down and goal where even though he got smacked, Faizon still delivered a dime to the end zone for a touchdown, officially giving Tennessee a 2-possession lead as they head further into the third quarter, and giving them a ton of momentum going forward too as they would eventually get the ball back up 14-3. But then everything seemed to change as one of the defenders sacked Faizon Brandon, forcing him to fumble, but thankfully a lineman picks it up, allowing this volunteer offense an opportunity to keep this drive alive, which eventually they did more than just that. Faizon had moved his team right back downfield into scoring range. And by the time the fourth quarter came around, they ran a play that worked all season long, as a pass gets to a wide open tight end who eventually crossed over the goal line for another touchdown on the day, putting Tennessee up by 3 possessions in the fourth quarter, and allowed them to finish off one of the biggest games of the season as they move to 11-0. Tennessee would take care of business against Texas 24-10. And although Faizon Brandon didn't even go for 200 yards on the day, those 3 touchdowns were absolutely crucial, ultimately doing enough to not only give his team the win, but also push them to be the now #1 team in the nation. All throughout the season, they had absolutely dominated their opponents. And at this point, they felt pretty confident that they would one day be able to etch their name into college football history. Is that Duke? Duke won the national championship? Man, what the Halliburton? They're an 82 overall team. How is this even possible? They're out here blowing people out by 50? Hey man, whoever the coach is for Duke, I don't care how much you're getting paid, you're not getting paid enough because this is crazy. By the way, it don't really matter to Tennessee because if they ever played them, Faizon Brandon said they're going to beat them by 60. So luckily for Duke, they don't got them on the schedule. But unluckily for Tennessee's next opponent, they're going to have to deal with the Volunteers as they come into their house on their final week of the season to face off against Vanderbilt. Now, it did not take long into Tennessee's opening possession for them to realize that they were playing against one of the weakest teams that they've seen all season. Faizon Brandon damn near threw this ball up like Uncle Rico, and somehow the receiver was still able to come up with a catch for a touchdown. A huge play downfield that clearly set the tone for Tennessee going forward. Because although Vanderbilt would end up taking a lead, Tennessee would just take it right back, putting up some points that put them up 14-10, and then after a couple field goals, they would eventually be up 20-10. And one thing that Faizon Brandon really hadn't done in a while was make some plays with his legs. But this would all change here as he scrambled out of the pocket, got a nice block downfield, and easily glided down the sideline for another touchdown on the day, putting Tennessee up by now 3 possessions here in the fourth quarter. But if that was not good enough, they would eventually get the ball right back down towards the goal line. And at this point, it's got to be Faizon's favorite play because he hits the tight end once again for another score on his season, doing enough to not only give Faizon his 4th touchdown of the day, but also give Tennessee their 12th win and an undefeated regular season. Tennessee was now officially a powerhouse, absolutely dominating teams all year and establishing themselves at the moment as the best team in the entire nation. So it was no surprise that the coaches were literally as happy as possible. The only thing is that now they were heading to the SEC championship against the #2 ranked team in the country. So Faizon didn't waste no time going into what could be the toughest game that he's ever played in his entire life, as Tennessee is going into the SEC championship game, ready to face off against the #2 ranked team in the country, the Georgia Bulldogs. Now, Tennessee was having a pretty decent opening possession before they would eventually get stopped on 3rd down. Faizon Brandon all throughout the first quarter looked like he was getting chased by a pack of wild dogs, but for now he was definitely persevering and coming up with some big plays downfield regardless. He continued to use his legs knowing that it would be the only way that he would come up with a win, and it was actually working out for him as he helped get his team down inside the red zone. Unfortunately though, he would have a pretty tough time getting in the end zone, and luckily he didn't throw a pick on this play. Eventually Tennessee would find themselves down 7-3, but Faizon Brandon kept delivering strikes over the middle, finding a guy that helped move the team towards scoring position, and eventually they would get down to the goal line. But with less than 10 seconds left, they were taking a risk on this play trying to get to the end zone, but it turns out that Faizon would throw a pick. A horrible turnover that leaves points on the board for Tennessee. And eventually by the end of the third quarter, they would find themselves down by a touchdown. Luckily though, it was all good because Faizon was using his legs to make another play, but then he got hit by a defender and fumbled, where it was picked up by Georgia and taken the entire distance the other way for a scoop and score, giving the Bulldogs a now 2-possession lead. Now bringing us to the fourth quarter where they were down 17-3, but one nice throw to the outside where a receiver takes advantage and gets upfield for a big gain, seemingly brings Tennessee right back in this game. Because on the very next play, Faizon was out there using his legs to extend another play. He seen the guy coming his way and said, "Hey," breaking off what would be a tackle and dove in the end zone for a touchdown, bringing Tennessee within one score of potentially tying this game up. But they would get the ball back with Georgia having a 2-possession lead again. And with less than 2 minutes left in this game and no timeouts left, it felt like Tennessee had to score immediately, which it actually seemed like they were doing a pretty good job of. This play right here brought them right back into scoring position, where a few plays later a handoff to the running back easily gets him across the goal line for a touchdown. Unfortunately though, it seems like it was just too little too late. As it turns out, the Tennessee would go on to take their first loss of the season, losing the SEC championship 20-17. And Faizon Brandon can't help but blame himself for not only the interception at the goal line, but the fumble in the red zone. Other than that, he knew he played a pretty decent game, but unfortunately it just was not enough. But now that the season is over, there are some awards that are being given out. And it turns out that Noah Fafita out of Clemson wins the Heisman Trophy, beating out DJ Lagway and Nico Iamaleava. But as far as Tennessee, their true freshman would also receive his accolades, as he goes on to earn Freshman All-SEC and establish himself as the #1 freshman quarterback in the nation by earning himself Freshman All-American. And on top of that, it turns out that Tennessee would end up as the 3rd-ranked team in the country, officially earning themselves a bye week in the college football playoffs. So yeah, man, these boys were now ready to go crazy and do everything they could to get themselves to a national championship. But then, man, y'all might not even believe it, but something crazy happened. Because after Brandon Faizon was actually playing in the college football playoffs, I actually heard a knock at my door. So I get up wondering who this could possibly be, and like I said, y'all might not believe it, but it was actually Sydney Sweeney at the door. But it wasn't just her, because Haley Steinfeld was also there. And you see me, like, I tried to tell him, I said, "Hey ladies, listen, I can't do this right now. I gotta get back to work, y'all, you know what I'm saying? Like, I gotta get this video out." But they were like practically begging me, like doing everything in their power to just get me to hang out with them. So, how could I say no? So, I decided to take them to the movies, get some popcorn, see Superman. Really great movie, by the way, 9.5 out of 10. But then you see what had happened was I had gone back home, and then they said, "Hey, I want to see your bedroom." And then I was like, "Hey, you know what? Come on in, why not?" So then what had happened was we was all hanging out, just watching TV. And out of nowhere, man, Sydney Sweeney just leans over, and it looked like she was about to try to kiss me. So then what had happened was I woke up from my dream, and I realized I didn't record the next 2 games. But I say next 2 games because the first game of the college football playoffs, the Tennessee Volunteers took on Tulane and just barely beat them in overtime, coming up with a win that moved them on to the second round against the defending national champions, the Duke Blue Devils. And in this one, Tennessee just barely came out with a W against the defending national champs, squeaking out a win in the Rose Bowl that officially led them to the college football national championship. And I genuinely do not know how they managed to do it, but somehow it turns out that Nico Iamaleava has led the UCLA Bruins to the championship game as well. So just to set the stage here, the former quarterback for Tennessee is about to play against his old team to earn the title as the #1 team in the nation. But in order to do that, he's going to have to get through the #1 freshman quarterback in the country, as Faizon Brandon has proved that he is not afraid of the big moments. And he's about to do everything he can to help bring his team to the top of the college football world. Now we start this game off on a 3rd and 2 where Tennessee runs an RPO that effectively gets a receiver open and allows him to make a play to get the team inside the red zone. But they would eventually get pushed to a 3rd down where Faizon was using his legs to make a play, throwing a pass out to a receiver that would unfortunately fall incomplete. And also pretty unfortunately, although Tennessee had the lead, their offense would start struggling greatly, as they were just barely able to get themselves back in field goal range, but that didn't really seem to matter when UCLA would come out and take the lead. And sadly, it didn't look like it was going to get better anytime soon, as Faizon was getting dropped in the backfield. By the 3rd quarter, Tennessee was still losing this game 6-7, and all the momentum was on UCLA's side as they pushed Tennessee to another 3rd down that they were not able to convert. Luckily, though, things began to change as it turns out that UCLA was called for a penalty, giving Tennessee another opportunity on this drive that they would definitely take advantage of, as Faizon found a guy underneath who took this ball upfield and came up with a big play to get Tennessee across the 50. Now bringing us to a 2nd down at the top of the 4th quarter where Faizon Brandon comes up with his best pass of his entire season. This kid was somehow able to fit this ball in between 2 defenders on the sideline, eventually bringing us to another 3rd down and 11, where another incredible pass while getting smoked in the backfield leads Tennessee down to the goal line. And a play later, all it took was a handoff to the running back who got across for a touchdown, finally giving Tennessee a lead back in this game that they were unsure if they would ever be able to regain. Man, them boys were so hyped that this dude didn't care where he was celebrating. And on top of that, UCLA would actually turn the ball over with great field position for Tennessee, allowing Faizon Brandon to come up with some nice throws over the middle to move his team closer to the goal line, eventually leading us to a 1st down and 10 where UCLA's defense completely bit on the running back handoff and allowed Faizon to take this read option up the middle for a touchdown, now giving Tennessee a 2-possession lead in this game, and it seemed like at this point they had all the momentum, at least until UCLA would bring themselves within a score. And after this Tennessee offense began to start making some mistakes, the Volunteers were now completely stalling out on their next offensive drive, leaving UCLA with 2 timeouts and around 30 seconds left with an opportunity to go downfield and potentially win this game. And after an incredible season for Faizon Brandon, all he could do was just sit on the sideline and watch as Nico Iamaleava in UCLA got stopped, meaning that the Tennessee Volunteers have officially won the national championship, winning their first title since 1998. And led by their true freshman quarterback, they established themselves as the #1 team in the nation. Faizon Brandon had an incredible season, earning honors as a freshman All-SEC, freshman All-American. And now he is officially just the 3rd freshman quarterback to ever lead his team and win a national championship. Now in this one, Faizon Brandon definitely outshined Nico Iamaleava, because although he didn't throw a touchdown, he also did not throw an interception, which turned out to be a pretty big deal as far as earning their first title in almost 30 years. And after his freshman season, Faizon Brandon's trophy room is already looking better than most players ever see in their life. Not to mention he had a pretty amazing year as well, going for over 3,800 yards, with 31 touchdowns to only 4 interceptions. But after Tennessee beat out their former quarterback who left them just a couple seasons ago, there was almost no way that Faizon Brandon had any interest of leaving the program, even though he had plenty of opportunity to do so. He was going to do everything he can to become the best quarterback in the nation, but all that would have to wait for next season. So if you want to see a season 2 of Faizon Brandon, with his name spelled correctly by the way, be sure to get this video to 1,000 likes and subscribe to the channel down below. Also be sure to comment down below who else you guys want to see next, and YouTube thinks you'll like one of these other stories until the next one comes out. If you got to this point in the video, just know that I appreciate you more than you'll ever know. I hope you all are having a great summer and are looking forward to football season, and other than that, I'm gonna catch you guys next time.